What's going on, football fans? It's time once again for another rendition of the Pound for Pound. I'm your host, J.R. Clark, and today we're just going to be wrapping up OTAs, right? We're going to break camp. We're going to, just kind of wrap up the off season. It's been a quiet camp, really. I mean, it wasn't a ton of news in a sense coming out. Not like in years past, but I got a couple topics that I want to touch on. So without further ado, let's just kind of jump on into it. Let's start with the bad news in a sense. Stephen Means went down a couple weeks ago. I'm sure all y'all seen it, read it, pontificated on it. But I was kind of upset to see that. Obviously, for reasons that you don't want to see anybody go down with an injury. But I really thought that Means could, provide a good rotational piece for this defensive line coming into the season. I really felt like he was one of the reasons why they didn't necessarily address the defensive line early in the draft or early in free agency like we thought they might. So it was kind of sad to see him go down. But they must, like what they see so far. They did bring in Bailey, Alan Bailey, defensive end in the mold of, like a Michael Bennett's not the right word, but more of like a 3-4 end. Used to play for Kansas City, played last year for the Patriots. They brought him in for a workout. He left without signing, but he hasn't signed anywhere else, so they may still bring him back at the start of training camp. It could be a thing where, he didn't necessarily want to go to OTAs kind of deal. So keep an eye on that in the coming weeks. If they decide to bring him in probably if they do, it'll be like a 1-year deal, kind of like they've done in the past with either a Claiborne or a Williams or whatnot. But with that being said, I kind of somewhat alluded to it. I've been seeing it floating around a lot on Twitter and a lot of articles. I think the Falcon Wire, the Falcons attachment to USA Today, one of their guys wrote it up. Are the Falcons switching schemes? Is there a scheme switch in the future? And that's an interesting topic to broach, because if you look at some of the personnel, it may suggest like a scheme switch. It may suggest going to more of a 3-4 than a 4-3, especially with reports of, Tack McKinley working out with the linebackers, doing more of a stand-up rushing, which I really believe both him and Beasley, I think, are comfortable stand-up rushing. I think both of them could potentially be pretty good as outside linebackers, especially Beasley. I think I know they've dropped him into coverage before, and we weren't really all that impressed by him. But I think if that's the direction they want to go, he could be an asset in that aspect. Not necessarily into coverage, but disguising, when and where he's blitzing or whatnot, if he's blitzing, if he's coming or whatnot. So that's an interesting thing to keep an eye on as we get into camp and we progress through camp, is to see where and how Tack and Beasley are being deployed, because that'll give you a little bit more of an indication on, are they truly going to switch to a 3-4, or is this more that 4-3 under that Dan Quinn brought with him from Seattle, which is a 4-3 with 3-4 tendencies, or a 4-3 with 3-4 looks, using a lot more 3-4 personnel. So it'll be interesting to see how they deploy Tack and Vic. And while I'm bringing up Vic, might as well bring up the whole, he held out and, not held out, but didn't show up in voluntary minicamp. I've stressed that word, voluntary. Would we like him there? Well, yeah, hell yeah, of course we want him there. We want everybody there. Especially a guy coming off a not so great of a season. But, I mean, when's the last time you went to non-mandatory overtime at your work? That's essentially what we're talking about here. We're talking about work that he doesn't, he's not contracted to be there for. And you're going to say, well, everybody else was there and this guy was there. Well, Deion Jones wasn't there. Grady Jarrett wasn't there. Julio Jones wasn't there. And y'all are going to sit and tell me, well, they had good years, except for, Deion, who was injured. That's not his fault. But coming off of a down year, we want all hands on deck. I understand completely. I mean, of course, hell, I want all hands on deck too. But I'm not going to sit here and lose my mind over a guy not showing up for voluntary minicamp. He showed up for OTAs. He showed up for the mandatory minicamp. That's, he's contracted to be there for that. So, good faith, he was there, and he was putting in work. Speaking of putting in work, I saw this past week with all this going on that some of our fellow YouTubers, the Fila Sportscast or Sports Podcast, some of their guys kind of got into it a little bit with the local radio on Twitter, and I can't say that I blame them. I mean, it was the afternoon show on 92.9 The Game. They were going hard in on Beasley, as whatever their prerogative, and they ended up going back and forth on Twitter, and I feel like the Fila guys had a point. I mean, our sports media around here is more negative than anything else. I mean, the sports media is the reason why I started doing this. I got tired of hearing nothing but negatives about our team, so I decided to start recording my own opinion. And so, yeah, I agree with those guys. All you ever hear out of them is just shock jock type material, and it gets old after a while. It's like, what are y'all mad about today? Same thing with our beat writer, the famous D. Orlando Ledbetter, going back and forth with Tack McKinley. Like, yes, these guys are contracted to have an engagement with the media, but you're gonna sit there. You can tell when a guy don't want to talk or doesn't necessarily want to ask your question. Why are you want to keep badgering him about it? And then get butthurt and go after him on Twitter. That's just, I don't know. It just screams unprofessional to me, But I've always had those opinions about Ledbetter. I felt like he should. I understand he's doing his job, doing what he gets paid to do, but he really just doesn't seem like he likes doing what he gets paid to do, or at least doesn't like the team he covers. I mean, I guess he doesn't have to like the team he covers, but man, sometimes it feels like he goes out of his way just to bash the team. And that ain't cool either. If you're not going to like the team, which whatever, you don't got to, at least be non-biased. If you're going to throw up the journalism card and talk about, oh, we're the media and we're supposed to ask the tough questions, well, how about be unbiased, be balanced with your approach. All we hardly ever get out of D. Orlando Ledbetter is just negative, just bashing the team every chance he gets. It's like he's holding a grudge from, getting kicked out of practice years ago. That was under a different regime, I mean, damn, dude. Got to back off a little bit. But, yeah, anyway, if you hadn't checked out the Fila Sportscast, here on YouTube, check them out. They do a real good job. They do a lot of live shows. They have a lot of guests on and stuff like that, and I think they do a real good job. So, you ought to go check them out. Definitely support them. They talk about everything as far as Atlanta sports goes. They talk about, the baseball and soccer and Georgia Tech and Georgia State and all those guys. So, just definitely give them a listen. Anyway, back to the Birds. So, like I stated before, we had Stephen Means went down. That sucks, but I think they're feeling pretty confident about what Kaminsky brings to the table. At least in early on in his career, I think he's going to be a solid run stopper, and that's kind of like, I think he's going to take over that Brooks Reed role. Now he could develop into more than that, obviously, but I think they're definitely, to start with, going to be comfortable with that. Starting them out in probably a base package type deal on obvious rundowns, and then maybe let him go after the passer as he starts progressing. So he's a guy that I think you should watch going into camp. Definitely try to catch any reports, about him. Some of the other guys that are looking good, Russell Gage, is looking good. From what, from what I've seen, he's some of the ones that Dan Quinn has called out, and has stood out in this camp, which will be good. That's important, to push for that receiver role, that one of them lower tier receiver roles. If he can really, push Justin Hardy, that could be an interesting camp battle. I'm trying to keep my eye on what I feel like will be interesting camp battles. You've got obviously most of your positions locked in, but there are a few, down towards the middle to the end of the roster that are interesting, like, the third running back. You got Devontae and Ito obviously locked in, but, you got Brian Hill and Quadrea Olison. Anyway, the running back out of Pitt. Boy, I blanked on that one big time. You got them battling for a potential roster spot, because I don't see the Falcons carrying 4 running backs. And it'd be really interesting to see if Ricky Ortiz sticks around. He didn't get used a ton last year. Now, that was Sark as the OC, and I would have to actually go look and see how often a fullback was used in Tampa Bay last year. But the interesting nugget on that is Luke Stoker, the tight end. They said that he's played some fullback and is lined up at fullback, and so that might give some versatility to that position. You could cover the third or fourth tight end and the fullback with one guy, so that might be something to watch there. I don't know, man. I don't see Ricky Ortiz sticking, but I've been wrong before. But if Luke Stoker can come in and provide some versatility to that role, I think he's got a real good chance of sticking around. Him and Paulson. The tight end spot altogether is interesting, because you got Paulson, you got Stoker, you got Salbert coming back, and then obviously Hooper. So that's really interesting to see exactly how many they carry. And I think this is one of the first times Alex Gray, the rugby guy, can actually be on the roster. So it'll be interesting to see if he sticks around or not, if he makes the roster. Because, he could be an interesting option, as far as like a fullback tight end or, an H-back combo. That could be real interesting. As far as I've seen and read, Chris Lindstrom has been pretty much starting right out the gate with running with the ones at right guard, so that's good to see. And it sounds like Caleb McGarry has been working with the ones, but not as consistent as Lindstrom, which is fine. I say it's fine. I think they took McGarry at the end of the first round because they didn't think he was going to be there in the second round. Honestly, I think that's why they traded back into the first. Because something came out, I'm sure y'all saw, with a quote coming out that Dimitrov promised blank to fix the O-line this year, this offseason. Made a promise that those 42 sacks and 100-plus hits wasn't going to happen again. So I think he put either undo's maybe not the right word, but put pressure on himself, and maybe that influenced him trading back up into the first round to get McGarry. Now, if it works out, nobody will remember. You know what I'm saying? If in this draft they cemented the right guard and the right tackle for the next 5 to 8 years, or 7 to 10 years or whatever, nobody's going to look back on that quote. But if one of those two dudes ends up being a bum, that's going to be yet another thing on, like, a stain on Dimitrov, because people just love to attribute the bad picks to Dimitrov, but they don't like to attribute the good picks to Dimitrov. If nobody likes to talk about the fact that give credit where credit is due. Julio Jones is the best receiver in the freaking league. Nobody wants to give Dimitrov credit for that. Regardless of what y'all think or what y'all say, all the stats prove that Matt Ryan is an elite quarterback. Nobody wants to give Dimitroff credit for that. That's okay. No bigs. I don't care. I mean, he's still got a job, and I'm glad he's still our GM. So, with that being said, I think that you may start the season with Ty Sombrello as your right tackle. I could be completely wrong on that, but they brought him back for a reason. And he did stabilize the right side of that offensive line towards the end of the year last year. So just keep that in mind. Yeah, I know in 16, Vic Beasley abused him like a drum in that Denver game. But the best of my knowledge, I think he was coming off an injury and he hadn't been the starter. So sometimes when you're a backup, you don't necessarily prepare like you're supposed to. Hell, sometimes when you're a starter, you don't prepare like you're supposed to. But with that being said, and that promise made to blank himself from Dimitroff, I think that's why you also got, Chris Brown or Brown and Carpenter in free agency, because I think they were, for the most part, happy with their starters last year, but when their starters went down, that pretty much shot the whole offensive line, and I don't think they wanted that again. So you drafted 2 guys in the first round and then signed 2 guys that have starting experience, and not a little bit of starting experience, a good bit of starting experience. So with that being said, and the guys that they signed and the guys that were already on the roster, with the talent that they brought in through the draft, I think they were, they're almost guaranteeing to fix the offensive line. And as Falcons fans, y'all got to be happy with that. I mean, hell, when we had a quote-unquote top 5 offensive line in 2016, you saw what we were able to do. I think we can be back to that again. I think that, providing that all those guys stay healthy, we can be back to being able to impose our will on offense, whether it be through the pass game or through the run game. I think it's very interesting this year. I think the thing that we should watch more this year than anything else, especially in camp, are the coaches. Because that was something Quinn said, that it wasn't just the players. He handpicked Marquand Manuel. I don't think he let go of Marquand Manuel as a scapegoat. Now, he might have. You always, at the end of a 7-9 season, somebody's got to be a sacrificial lamb. We pretty much knew Sark was going to go. And I was a little shocked when Manuel went. But I think there was a reason. Dan Quinn seems like he, values loyalty. So to move away from Manuel, his hand-picked guy, I felt like there had to be a reason. I felt like that when the injuries happened, maybe Manuel didn't adjust the scheme like he should have. Or like Dan Quinn would have wanted him to. So, maybe he didn't make the necessary adjustments to the scheme. Or hell, maybe the entire league has kind of picked up on the scheme, And Dan Quinn's feeling like he needs to adjust it. And he's feeling like he needs to give his full focus to it because that's what he's good at. That's what he knows how to do. So therefore, that's what he's going to do. And that's what he's going to focus on. So he hired, 2 former head coaches to run the offense. That way he felt he could trust them, leave it in their hands, especially 2 guys that Matt Ryan is already familiar with. And Malarkey and freaking Cutter again. So we'll see how that plays out, obviously. But I think that's an interesting one to watch. I think that's an interesting aspect to this season. Because if we can get back to a consistency on offense and keeping Matt Ryan upright and get back to a league average or a higher defense, I think we could be right back in the hunt. Obviously. That's my opinion. And so, those are the things that I am watching for going into this camp. I'm watching, any kind of information I can glean from how the coaches are doing and how the coaches are interacting, and any other free agents that they may bring in. These are all things that are kind of keying in. If they bring back the Bailey, who, like I said, was in Kansas City, oh, by the way, where Bob Sutton was, maybe that does, kind of signify a little bit more of a shift to a 3-4. Maybe Quinn feels like he can be more creative out of a 3-4 instead of pigeonholed to, the 4-3 under with the cover 3 behind him. So we'll see. It's going to be real interesting. I don't think this is a make or break season for Dan Quinn and Thomas Dimitrov, but I think this can set up a make or break season. If we come out of this season another 7-9, then I would say that they're probably on the hot seat, like big time. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how this season plays out, but I'm real excited as always. I'm always excited this time of year with the new season on the horizon. And we get to see it a little earlier than normal. We got the Hall of Fame game against the Broncos early part of August. So we'll get to see a lot more of our draft picks and younger guys. So I can't wait to get back here and talk to y'all about that after that goes on. But you may not see me again, until camp kicks up, unless something happens, unless something breaks news-wise, or something, worth talking about. But right now, what I would like to do is actually, I want to give away something. I want to give away this Falcons hat. Okay? Never worn. Good looking hat, right? So, what I want y'all to do is leave me a comment down in the section below, right? And now don't comment if you ain't going to want to send me your address to where I can mail it to you, right? So, but leave a comment down below. Don't say anything about the hat. Just I want you to comment, comment on the video. And I'll pick a comment at random and get in touch with that person and give away this hat. And I'm going to start trying to do things like that. May not always be a hat. It might be a t-shirt or maybe other things. But yeah, I like, I want to start giving away stuff every now and again. Try to get a little interaction going. So yeah, definitely leave a comment down below. And I'll pick somebody out of the comment section. Tell your friends. Y'all saw that Toby D's back, which is awesome. I'm so glad to have Toby back. I'm glad his situation changed a bit to where he can get back to making videos. I'm glad to see him actually making videos. So y'all get to see his awesome face that, I've gotten to see it, but yes, this is one of the first times y'all have gotten to see it. So unless we were doing a video together. He's got a pretty cool setup with all that fat head stuff behind him. That looks pretty cool. So, like I said, I'm glad to see Toby back to doing videos. Y'all share and support him for sure. I ask that y'all share and, support the channel. We're pretty close to an interesting goal. So the more y'all share and the more y'all subscribe, the more y'all watch, maybe the more things that we can do, as far as, giveaways or other things of that nature. So, anywho, thanks for your time. And as always, Falcons fans, rise up.